Hello, this is the Bible History School. In our Bible History School, we summarize the words of the 66 books of the Old and New Testaments and upload them as short videos every day. It makes it much easier to understand the text and overall flow of the Bible. The Old Testament has 39 books and 929 chapters. The New Testament has 27 books and 260 chapters. And the 66 books of the Old and New Testaments have a total of 1,189 chapters. It takes 1,189 days to read one chapter of the Bible every day. If you just read the Bible, there are many parts that are difficult to read and understand. So, we summarized the key contents of each chapter and created short videos. It is much easier to understand the content if you watch the appropriate videos together than if you just read the sentences. We made it into easy sentences, middle and high school students can easily understand. Not only students but also ordinary people who have a hard time reading the Bible due to their busy daily lives. It is good for them to meditate on one chapter of the Bible every day. I hope you will encourage your children, parents, friends, and neighbors to read the Bible. In addition, the Bible History School is currently serializing Revelation and World History with great acclaim. We would appreciate it if you could subscribe together. Your support and encouragement have given us a lot of strength in producing Bible a Day in Revelation and World History. Thank you very much. Exodus, Chapter 1. The Israelites are abused. The Israelites entered Egypt with Jacob and prospered and became strong. However, a new king who did not know Joseph came to rule Egypt. Pharaoh was afraid that the Israelites would become too numerous and too strong. Pharaoh built the city of Ramesses to oppress the Israelites. However, the more the Israelites were abused, the more they multiplied. Pharaoh, gripped by fear, ordered the Hebrew midwives to kill the male babies. However, the midwives, fearing God, disobeyed and saved their lives. In response, Pharaoh issued a cruel order to throw all the male babies into the Nile River. The suffering of the Israelites reached its peak. Provided by Bible History School. Thank you for subscribing. Exodus, Chapter 2-1. Moses is born. Pharaoh's command to throw all the male children of Israel into the Nile River was in effect. At that time, a man from the house of Levi married a Levite woman and had a son. When she saw that the baby was handsome, she hid him for 3 months, but she could not hide him any longer. The baby's mother made a basket of reeds and put the baby in it, placing it among the reeds of the Nile River. At that time, Pharaoh's daughter came down to bathe, found the basket of reeds, and took pity on the baby. The baby's older sister approached him and recommended a Hebrew wet nurse. And the baby's biological mother became the wet nurse. After the baby grew up, Pharaoh's daughter named him Moses, saying, "I pulled him out of the water." This was the first step toward a child's fate in suffering. Provided by Bible History School. Thank you for subscribing. Exodus, Chapter 2-2. Moses flees to Midian. After Moses grew up, he felt sorry for his Hebrew brothers, who were suffering from hard labor. One day, he witnessed an Egyptian beating a Hebrew brother. When Moses looked around and saw that no one was there, he killed the Egyptian and buried him in the sand. However, when this was discovered and Pharaoh tried to kill Moses, Moses fled to Midian. Moses was staying at a well in Midian. At that time, he helped the daughters of the Midianite priest, who were being harassed by the shepherds and watered their flocks. The daughters told their father, Reuel, about this. Reuel invited Moses to eat a meal and asked him to stay with him. Moses took Zipporah as his wife. Moses confessed that he was a stranger in a foreign land when he gave birth to his son Gershom. After a long time, the king of Egypt died. The Israelites' agonizing sighs and cries reached God. Provided by the Bible History School. Thank you for subscribing. Exodus, chapter 3. Jehovah calls Moses. While tending his flock in the wilderness of Midian, Moses witnessed a mysterious sight. A bush was on fire, but the tree was not burning. As Moses approached, he heard the voice of God. God called Moses by name. Jehovah declared that the ground Moses was standing on was holy ground, and told Moses to take off his shoes. God then revealed that he was the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and announced his plan to save the Israelites, who were suffering in Egypt. Moses questioned the meaning of his calling. God said, "I am who I am." And he promised to be with him, and revealed his power to save Israel. Moses eventually accepted the calling, and began his journey following God's command. Provided by the Bible History School. Thank you for subscribing. Exodus, chapter 4-1. Jehovah gives power to Moses. Moses confessed his own shortcomings before Jehovah, and doubted his qualifications as the one who was called. However, Jehovah showed Moses evidence of his power, and strengthened his faith. He confirmed Jehovah's power, through the miracle of a staff turning into a snake and then returning to a staff, and a sign of leprosy appearing on his hand and then being cleansed. Moses still hesitated because he was not good at speaking. But Jehovah appointed his brother Aaron as his helper. Jehovah said to Moses, "Do not be afraid, follow my commands." Moses eventually obeyed, and prepared to return to Egypt, with the staff of God in his hand. Provided by Bible History School. Thank you for subscribing. Exodus, chapter 4-2. Moses returns to Egypt. Moses went to his father-in-law Jethro, to ask permission to return to his brothers in Egypt. Jethro prayed for Moses' peace and gave him permission. The Lord said to Moses, "It is now safe to return to Egypt." Moses set out with his wife and sons, holding the staff of God in his hand. The Lord told Moses in advance that he would perform miracles before Pharaoh, and that his heart would be hardened. The Lord also told Moses that Israel was his firstborn son, and warned that, if Pharaoh interfered with this, there would be great judgment. An incident occurred along the way, and the Lord tried to kill Moses. Moses' wife Zipporah circumcised her son, and resolved the matter. In the meantime, the Lord sent Aaron to meet Moses. Moses and Aaron, the two men, together, spoke the word of the Lord to the elders of Israel and performed miracles. The people believed all this, and they fell down and worshipped, realizing that the Lord had seen their suffering. Provided by Bible History School. Thank you for subscribing. Exodus, chapter 5. Moses and Aaron stand before Pharaoh. Moses and Aaron stood before Pharaoh, and told him the word of the Lord, the God of Israel. "Let my people go, so that they may celebrate the feast in the wilderness." But Pharaoh refused, saying that he did not know the Lord, and would not let the Israelites go. Moses and Aaron pleaded again, asking that they be allowed to offer sacrifices to God. However, Pharaoh did not listen to them, and instead made the people's work even harder. He stopped giving them straw, and ordered them to gather it themselves, and make bricks. The Israelites groaned in pain due to the harsh labor. The recorders appealed to Pharaoh, but he too was ignored. Moses eventually went to God and lamented, "Why are you allowing the Israelites to be mistreated like this?" Provided by the Bible History School. Thank you for subscribing. Exodus, chapter 6. God calls Moses. God said to Moses, "Now you will see what I will do to Pharaoh with my strong hand. Pharaoh will let the Israelites go out of Egypt. I appeared to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob as God Almighty. But I did not make my name known as Jehovah. But now I have heard the groans of the children of Israel in Egypt. And I have remembered my covenant. Therefore I will deliver them from their burdens. And I will be their God, and I will bring them into the land of promise." But the people of Israel did not listen to Moses because of their broken hearts and hard labor. Moses worried that his mouth would be dull, and he would not be able to speak. However, God clearly told him to go to Pharaoh, the king of Egypt, and to all the people and give them his command. Provided by the Bible History School. Thank you for subscribing. Exodus, chapter 7. Aaron's rod becomes a serpent. Exodus chapter 7 begins with Moses and Aaron going to Pharaoh, the king of Egypt, as commanded by God. God made Moses a god to Pharaoh and sent Aaron with him as a prophet. God planned to harden Pharaoh's heart and show him many miracles. When Aaron's rod was thrown in front of Pharaoh, it became a snake. The Egyptian magicians did something similar. But Aaron's rod swallowed the snakes of the Egyptian magicians. This revealed God's power, but Pharaoh's heart was still hardened. First plague: water turned to blood. God turned the Nile River into blood through Moses and Aaron. As a result, the fish in the river died, and a terrible stench appeared. Pharaoh did not move in the face of these calamities. And the reality of God's judgment continued throughout the land of Egypt. Provided by the Bible History School. Thank you for subscribing. Exodus, chapter 8. Second, third, and fourth plagues. Exodus chapter 8 shows the plagues that came to Egypt through God's power. First, God commanded Pharaoh through Moses to let the Israelites go. When Pharaoh refused, the second plague, the plague of frogs, came. The frogs spread throughout Egypt, covering the king's palace, bed, and furnace, and they stank. Pharaoh pleaded with Moses and promised to let the Israelites go, but changed his mind when the frogs disappeared. Then, in the third plague, the dust of the ground became lice, and they crawled on the bodies of people and livestock. Even the magicians acknowledged this as God's power. But Pharaoh's heart became even more hardened. Then, the fourth plague of flies swept through Egypt. The Israelites living in Goshen were protected from the flies, revealing God's power. But Pharaoh still did not change his mind, and refused to liberate the Israelites. Provided by Bible History School. Thank you for subscribing. Exodus, chapter 9. Fifth, sixth, and seventh plagues. The Lord said to Moses, "Go to Pharaoh and let my people go." But Pharaoh refused, and Jehovah sent a severe plague on the livestock of Egypt. The livestock of the Israelites were not harmed. But all the livestock of Egypt died. But Pharaoh's heart was still hard. After this, Jehovah instructed Moses and Aaron to scatter ashes from the oven into the sky. Then boils broke out throughout Egypt, tormenting both man and beast. But Pharaoh never let the Israelites go. Then Jehovah sent an unprecedented hailstorm throughout Egypt. All the people, animals, plants, and trees in the fields of Egypt were destroyed. But the hail did not fall on the land of Goshen, where the Israelites were. Pharaoh called Moses and Aaron, and confessed his wrongdoing and begged them to stop the hail. But when the rain and hail stopped, Pharaoh hardened his heart again, and changed his words. As Jehovah had warned, Pharaoh did not let the Israelites go. Provided by Bible History School. Thank you for subscribing. Exodus, chapter 10. Eighth and ninth plagues. The eighth plague in Exodus chapter 10 was the plague of locusts. God sent Moses again to Pharaoh to warn him that he would send locusts into the land of Egypt. However, Pharaoh was stubborn, and God caused an east wind to blow and sent a swarm of locusts into the land of Egypt. The locusts covered the entire land of Egypt, eating all the crops and fruit from the trees, and the land became desolate. Pharaoh was afraid, and called Moses and Aaron to confess his sins, but God hardened his heart again. Then, with the ninth plague, darkness covered Egypt. The darkness lasted for 3 days, but there was light where the Israelites lived. Pharaoh promised to let the Israelites go, but he made a condition: leave your livestock behind. In the end, the conflict between Moses and Pharaoh deepened. Provided by the Bible History School. Thank you for subscribing. Exodus, chapter 11. Warning of the death of the firstborn. Jehovah foretold Moses of the final plague. Jehovah told Moses that, after these plagues had passed, Pharaoh would finally release the Israelites from Egypt. Jehovah instructed the people to ask the Egyptians for articles of silver and gold. Moses told Pharaoh that all the firstborn in Egypt, both people and livestock, would die at midnight. However, the Israelites would be unharmed. And they would know that Jehovah made a distinction between Egypt and Israel. Even Pharaoh's servants would eventually bow down to Moses and beg him to let the Israelites go. Jehovah had hardened Pharaoh's heart, and he still would not let Israel go. Moses and Aaron did everything according to Jehovah's word. And the time was approaching for Jehovah to fulfill his promise. Provided by the Bible History School. Thank you for subscribing. Exodus, chapter 12-1. Passover. Exodus chapter 12 contains the beginning and meaning of Passover. God told Moses and Aaron to make this month the first month of the year. And God commanded the Israelites to prepare for the Passover. And God said that each household should prepare a lamb without blemish. Then God told them to slaughter the lamb and put its blood on the doorposts and lintels of their houses. And he told them to eat the meat roasted over fire with bitter herbs. The blood, that was done according to God's command, became a sign that the plague would pass over the house. At that time, God struck all the firstborn in the land of Egypt. But the house that was stained with blood was saved from God's punishment. From then on, this day was observed as a day to forever commemorate Jehovah's deliverance of the Israelites from Egypt. Passover continues to be a symbol of God's salvation and faithfulness. Provided by the Bible History School. Thank you for subscribing. Exodus 12-2. Israel leaves Egypt after the 10th plague. That night, the whole land of Egypt was in deep sorrow. Jehovah struck all the firstborn in Egypt, and even Pharaoh's firstborn died. The sound of wailing echoed throughout Egypt. Finally, Pharaoh called Moses and Aaron, and ordered them to leave with the Israelites, asking them to bless him. In the dire situation, the Israelites took the unleavened dough they had prepared, the silver and gold they had received from the Egyptians, and the clothing they had received. And they left in a hurry. That night, Jehovah's army left Egypt, where they had stayed for 430 years. This night, when God led them, would remain a night that would be remembered and given thanks to Jehovah for generations to come. Provided by Bible History School. Thank you for subscribing. Exodus, chapter 13. Pillar of cloud and pillar of fire. Exodus chapter 13 describes the Israelites being led by God after they left Egypt. During the day, God guided them in a pillar of cloud. And at night, God illuminated the Israelites' path with a pillar of fire. The pillar of cloud and the pillar of fire guided the Israelites exactly where to go. God did not lead the people along the land of the Palestinians, which was a short way. God led the Israelites through the Red Sea wilderness to escape the fear of war. All of these processes show that God led the people of Israel with his strong hand and power. In addition, the Israelites carrying Joseph's remains once again. This shows once again that God is a God who keeps his promises. The pillar of cloud and the pillar of fire symbolized God's constant presence. This also gives us great comfort that God is with us on our path forward through faith and trust. Provided by Bible History School. Thank you for subscribing. Exodus chapter 14. Crossing the Red Sea. The Israelites followed the guidance of Jehovah and arrived at the Red Sea. When Pharaoh and his army pursued them, the people were afraid and blamed Moses and Jehovah God. However, Moses reassured the people, saying, "Do not be afraid, but look to Jehovah for salvation." Jehovah commanded Moses to raise his staff and divide the sea. Then the Red Sea parted, and the Israelites walked on dry land. When the Egyptian army pursued them, Jehovah brought the waters back together and drowned them in the sea. In this way, Israel was completely saved from the pursuit of Egypt, and praised Jehovah's greatness and power. The Israelites feared Jehovah and believed in their leader Moses. Provided by Bible History School. Thank you for subscribing. Exodus chapter 15. The bitter waters of Marah turned into sweet water. Exodus chapter 15 is full of songs of praise that the Israelites offered to God after crossing the Red Sea. Moses praised the Lord and exalted his great power and victory. He sang of the amazing history of God, saving Israel by throwing Pharaoh and his army into the sea. Miriam and the women also sang praises while dancing with timbrels. After that, the Israelites could not find water for 3 days and arrived at Marah. But the water was too bitter to drink. Amid the people's complaints, Moses cried out to the Lord, and God showed them a tree. When Moses threw the tree into the water became sweet, and everyone could drink it. God spoke here and promised that, if the people kept his commandments and ordinances, he would not bring on them any of the diseases that he had brought on Egypt. Eventually, Israel arrived at Elim, a place rich in springs and palm trees, and settled there in peace. Provided by Bible History School. Thank you for subscribing. Exodus chapter 16. Manna and quail. The Israelites grumbled against Moses and Aaron in the wilderness because of hunger and anxiety. They longed for the time when they sat by the meat pots in Egypt, and complained that they were starving to death here. Then Jehovah promised to rain manna from heaven to feed the people. At night, quail covered the camp, and in the morning, white, round grain appeared on the dew. Moses told them that this food was manna given by God, and commanded them to gather as much as they needed. However, the manna of those who were greedy and kept more grew worms and spoiled. So the Israelites obeyed Jehovah's words. On the 7th day, the Sabbath, no manna fell, so on the 6th day, they gathered twice as much. The Israelites enjoyed the grace of God by eating the manna that he gave them for 40 years, until they reached the land of Canaan. Provided by the Bible History School. Thank you for subscribing. Exodus chapter 17. Water comes out of the rock. The Israelites left the desert of Sin and arrived at Rephidim. There was no water there. So they complained to Moses because they were very thirsty. Moses prayed to God, and God commanded Moses to strike the rock on Mount Horeb with his staff. When Moses did as God commanded, water flowed out of the rock, and the people could drink. After that, when Amalek attacked Israel, Moses told Joshua to fight Amalek. When Moses raised his hand from the top of the mountain, Israel won. But when he lowered his hand, Amalek prevailed. Aaron and Hur held Moses' arms, so that his hands would not come down until the sun went down. In the end, Joshua defeated Amalek, and Moses built an altar and called it Jehovah Nissi. God declared that he would erase Amalek from the memory of men forever. Provided by the Bible History School. Thank you for subscribing. Exodus, chapter 18. Jethro visits Moses. While Moses was encamped at the mountain of God in the wilderness, he met his father-in-law Jethro. Jethro, a Midianite priest, came to visit Moses. After hearing the amazing story of God's deliverance of Israel from Egypt, Jethro brought Moses' wife Zipporah and his 2 sons Gershom and Eleazar to visit Moses. Moses and Jethro greeted each other, and Moses explained in detail the miracles and salvation that God had performed for Israel. Jethro praised the great God and was moved to worship with burnt offerings and sacrifices. The next day, Jethro saw Moses getting tired of judging the people alone and gave him advice. He suggested that they appoint capable, God-fearing, and honest men to judge together. According to his advice, Moses appointed commanders of thousands, commanders of hundreds, commanders of 50s, and commanders of 10s. They divided the tasks so that they would take care of the small ones, and Moses would only handle the big ones. In this way, Moses shared the burden, and the people also found peace. Provided by the Bible History School. Thank you for subscribing. Exodus, chapter 19. The Israelites reach Mount Sinai. 3 months had passed since the Israelites left Egypt. One day, they arrived in the wilderness of Sinai and pitched their tents in front of the mountain. Moses approached God, and God called him and spoke to him. God told him to tell the Israelites that he had saved them from Egypt and had carried them on eagle's wings. He also said that, if they listened to God's words and kept the covenant, they would become a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. The Israelites responded that they would follow God's command. On the 3rd day, God descended on Mount Sinai, and the entire mountain shook with fire and smoke. The sound of the trumpet grew louder, and God called Moses and warned the people not to come near the mountain. Moses spoke God's words and sanctified the people. In this way, God prepared the Israelites to make a covenant with them. Provided by the Bible History School. Thank you for subscribing. Exodus, chapter 20. The 10 Commandments. The 10 Commandments in Exodus chapter 20 are important words given directly by God to the Israelites. Commandment 1, I am the Lord your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, where you were a slave. You shall have no other gods besides me. Commandment 2, you shall not make for yourself any idols or serve them. Commandment 3, you shall not take the name of the Lord, your God in vain. Commandment 4, remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. Commandment 5, honor your father and mother. Commandment 6, you shall not kill. Commandment 7, you shall not commit adultery. Commandment 8, you shall not steal. Commandment 9, you shall not bear false witness against your neighbor. The 10th commandment, do not covet your neighbor's property. These commandments teach us the direction in which we should live in our lives and relationships. Loving God and our neighbors. These words are not just rules, but they are the promises of love and grace that God has given us. And they are truths that we should always keep at the center of our lives. Provided by the Bible History School. Thank you for subscribing. Exodus, chapter 21. Servants and violence and the law of the master's responsibility. Exodus chapter 21 is a law given to lead the Israelites to God's law of justice and love. This chapter deals with the law related to slaves, as well as violence and the responsibility of the master. Hebrew slaves were to serve for 6 years and be free in the 7th year. The relationship between master and slave was to be based on love and consideration. If a slave loved his wife and children and his master and refused to leave, he could be recognized as choosing to stay with them for life. There were also strict regulations that anyone who killed someone intentionally or was violent toward their parents was to be put to death. If a master or someone else assaulted a slave, causing serious injury or threatening life, compensation was paid or freedom was granted. In addition, if the owner did not manage his livestock or cattle properly and caused damage to others, the cattle were punished and the owner was also held properly responsible. All of these laws are precious words given by God to realize justice and righteousness, and establish harmony and responsible relationships among people. Provided by the Bible History School. Thank you for subscribing. Exodus, chapter 22. Laws on compensation and morality. Exodus chapter 22 contains specific teachings on compensation and morality that God's people must observe. The compensation provisions for theft emphasize justice and responsibility. Therefore, it states that compensation must be made if damage is caused to another person's property. It also stipulates detailed responsibilities for situations that may arise while guarding a neighbor's property, so that trust can be maintained between communities. In addition, it emphasizes the moral principle of protecting the weak, such as foreigners, widows, and orphans, and showing mercy and love to them. God reminded the Israelites of their past as strangers, and asked them to be considerate of their neighbors. It emphasizes justice and equality by prohibiting the abuse of the poor or receiving interest. This is not simply to regulate behavior, but has a profound meaning of leading us to live a life based on God's love and justice. Provided by the Bible History School. Thank you for subscribing. Exodus, chapter 23-1. Laws on justice and the Sabbath. Exodus chapter 23 clearly presents God's laws on justice and rest. First, it tells us not to give false testimony in order to establish justice among people. Also, you should not do evil by following the majority. And we should not unconditionally take the side of the poor. It even tells us not to turn away when an enemy's ox or donkey gets lost or falls down due to its load, but to help them. Justice for fairness says to reject bribes and shun falsehood. In particular, God commanded us not to oppress foreigners or strangers. God also gave instructions to let the earth, people, and animals rest so that everyone can enjoy rest. These laws do not remain mere systems, but reveal God's will to practice justice and mercy. This is an important teaching that we must practice even today. Provided by the Bible History School. Thank you for subscribing. Exodus, chapter 23-2. 3 Feasts and God's Promise. The latter half of Exodus chapter 23 is about God's command to the Israelites to observe 3 feasts and His promises to them. First, the Feast of Unleavened Bread commemorates their liberation from Egypt. And he tells them not to come before God empty-handed. Second, the Feast of Harvest is a feast of thanksgiving for the first fruits, symbolizing devotion to God's provision. Third, the Feast of Tabernacles is a feast of giving, thanks to God for everything harvested at the end of the year. In addition, God promised to guide and protect the people through the messengers he sent. He told the Israelites that he would give them victory and blessings from their enemies, if they obeyed and stayed away from idols. God, who keeps his promises, promised that he would eliminate the enemies, one by one, so that the Israelites could occupy a larger land. This emphasizes the importance of trust and obedience in living as God's people. Provided by the Bible History School. Thank you for subscribing. Exodus, chapter 24. Establishing the covenant at Mount Sinai. According to the word of the Lord, Moses took Aaron, Nadab, Abihu, and 70 of the elders of Israel, and went up Mount Sinai. However, God told Moses to come near, and the others to worship from afar. Moses told the people all the decrees and words of the Lord. Then, the people of Israel responded with one voice, that they would obey the Lord's commands. Afterwards, they made a covenant, and confirmed the covenant with blood, sprinkling it on the people, saying that this was the blood of the covenant that the Lord had established. Moses and the elders went up to God, and saw God's glory, and ate and drank. Moses then went up the mountain, to receive the stone tablets, to receive the word of God directly, and stayed on Mount Sinai for 40 days in the glory of the Lord. The people waited at the foot of the mountain, and felt the great presence of God. Provided by Bible History School. Thank you for subscribing. Exodus, chapter 25. The Sanctuary and the Ark of the Testimony. The Lord spoke to Moses, and asked the Israelites for offerings to build the sanctuary. The offerings that were to be willingly offered were gold, silver, bronze, and other precious materials. This was to build the sanctuary, where the Lord would dwell among the people. Moses was to prepare the tabernacle and the furniture, according to the plan of the sanctuary that the Lord had shown him. The Ark of the Covenant was made of acacia wood overlaid with pure gold, and contained in it the tablets of the covenant that Jehovah would give. On top of the ark was the mercy seat, and 2 cherubim with outstretched wings were placed, making it a holy place, where the Lord would meet with the people, and speak to them. The table for the bread of the presence, and the pure gold lampstand were also made, with great care according to the Lord's instructions. This represented the completion of the sanctuary, where the people of Israel would become one with God, and follow His will. Provided by the Bible History School. Thank you for subscribing. Exodus, chapter 26. The Tabernacle. Exodus chapter 26 deals with the construction process of the tabernacle, and detailed instructions for its design. It begins with the curtains made of finely twisted and intricately embroidered with cherubim, in blue, purple, and scarlet threads. It then goes on to describe in detail how to make each element of the tabernacle, including the curtains, connecting links, the covering, the boards, and the pillars. Each material, size, and even the method of connection are clearly recorded, as God showed Moses. The tabernacle is not a simple building, but a holy place, where God and His people are together. The tabernacle is divided into the holy place, and the most holy place. And the Ark of the Covenant, and the mercy seat are located in the center. This shows that the tabernacle is a place symbolizing sacred worship and God's presence. Provided by the Bible History School. Thank you for subscribing. Exodus, chapter 27. The altar and the courtyard of the tabernacle. Exodus chapter 27 contains detailed instructions for the important components of the tabernacle, namely the altar and the courtyard of the tabernacle. God commanded that the altar be made of acacia wood. He gave detailed instructions on the size and shape of the altar, and even how to cover it with brass. He also instructed that horns be made on the altar, and that vessels such as the ash bucket and shovels be made of brass. God also gave precise instructions on the length and width of the tabernacle courtyard, the material of the curtains, and the number of pillars. Finally, the regulations for the management of the lamps were also given. Pure oil made from olive oil was to be used to light the lamps day and night. And this was to be observed as a statute for generations to come. Provided by Bible History School. Thank you for subscribing. Exodus, chapter 28. Priestly clothing and breastplate of judgment. Exodus chapter 28 contains information about the priestly clothing and breastplate of judgment. God commanded Moses to make holy garments for his brother Aaron and his sons. The garments, made of gold, blue, purple, and scarlet threads, and finely twisted linen, were made gloriously and beautifully. This was to sanctify the office of the priest. The garments, which included the ephod, breastplate, outer garment, undergarment, turban, and belt, were intricately designed. In particular, the breastplate had the names of the 12 tribes of Israel, engraved in precious stones, and was firmly connected to the ephod with gold chains. The breastplate contained Urim and Thummim, so that Aaron could discern God's will. When Aaron entered the sanctuary to serve, all these garments symbolized his holy office. This is God's ordinance that Aaron and his descendants will keep forever. Provided by the Bible History School. Thank you for subscribing. Exodus, chapter 29. Priestly office and burnt offerings. God instructed Moses to prepare the consecration ceremony for Aaron and his sons, who would assume the priesthood. They prepared the sacrifice for atonement, and prepared unleavened bread and wafers. They were dressed in priestly garments, and anointed with anointing oil on their heads to consecrate them. They were then given blood to put on their ears, hands, and feet to show that their entire bodies belonged to God. On the altar, burnt offerings and sin offerings were offered to atone for sins. And wave offerings and heave offerings were waved before God to express their devotion. All of these procedures were repeated for 7 days, and the holy office of the priests was fully established. The ritual of offering burnt offerings every morning and evening also began. God said through all of this, "I will dwell among you, and you will be my people." That is, the inauguration ceremony was not just a ritual, but a sacred covenant ceremony that brought God's presence into Israel. Provided by the Bible History School. Thank you for subscribing. Exodus, chapter 30. Articles used on the tabernacle altar. Exodus chapter 30 describes the utensils used on the tabernacle's altar of incense. The altar was made of acacia wood, with horns extending from the corners. The altar was overlaid with pure gold, had a gold molding around it, and had gold rings to carry the poles. Aaron was instructed to burn sweet-smelling incense on it every morning and evening as a perpetual offering to Jehovah. In addition, each person counted was to be taxed with half a shekel for the service of the tabernacle. A bronze basin was also made between the tabernacle and the altar for washing. To anoint the priests and consecrate the utensils of the tabernacle, a holy oil made of special materials was prepared. Furthermore, they were to make holy incense and offer it only to Jehovah. The common people were warned not to reproduce these sacred objects for personal use. They were considered sacred, and were kept aside for sacred purposes. Provided by the Bible History School. Thank you for subscribing. Exodus, chapter 31. Making the furniture of the tabernacle. God appointed Bezalel of the tribe of Judah to make the furniture of the tabernacle and the sanctuary. God filled him with the Spirit of God, and gave him wisdom, intelligence, knowledge, and skills. God gave him sophisticated skills in handling various materials such as gold, silver, bronze, precious stones, and wood. God also appointed Oholiab of the tribe of Dan as his assistant, and gave the wise men the ability to make all the furniture that God had commanded Moses. The contents included the tabernacle, the Ark of the Covenant, the mercy seat, the table, the lampstand, the incense altar, the altar of burnt offering, the laver, the priestly garments, the anointing oil, and incense. God commanded the Israelites to keep the Sabbath. This was a sign of the covenant between God and them. And it was an everlasting covenant that they were to keep for generations. It is also a day to commemorate God creating the heavens and the earth in 6 days, and resting on the seventh day. Afterwards, God gave Moses 2 tablets of the testimony on Mount Sinai, which were stone tablets written by God himself. Provided by the Bible History School. Thank you for subscribing. Exodus, chapter 32. The Golden Calf. While Moses was on Mount Sinai receiving the law, the Israelites were anxious about his long absence. So they asked Aaron to make a new god. Aaron melted down their gold earrings and other items, and made a golden calf. The Israelites worshipped it and celebrated it, which made God angry. God told Moses that the people were corrupt, and threatened to destroy them. But Moses pleaded with God to turn away his wrath, and God changed his mind. When Moses came down from the mountain, he broke the golden calf, mixed the powder in water, and made the people drink it, rebuking them for their sins. The Levites stood on God's side, and followed God's command, and many were killed. However, Moses still interceded for the people, and asked for forgiveness. God warned them that there would be a day of retribution for their sins, and gave Moses another mission to lead the people. This story is a passage that makes us deeply contemplate what faith, patience, and devotion before God are. Provided by the Bible History School. Thank you for subscribing. Exodus, chapter 33. Commanded to leave Mount Sinai. Moses heard the word of Jehovah on Mount Sinai, and received a new command to lead the people. Jehovah commanded Moses to go up with the Israelites to the promised land. Jehovah said that he would defeat the Canaanites, but he would not personally accompany them. When the Israelites heard this, they were very sad, and took off their ornaments and repented. Moses set up the tabernacle outside the camp, and spoke to Jehovah face to face, asking for his grace. Moses pleaded that he could not go forward without Jehovah's company. And Jehovah heard his prayer, and promised to accompany him. Moses asked to see Jehovah's glory, and Jehovah promised to show him his goodness. But he said that he would not be able to see God's face, but only his back. Provided by the Bible History School. Thank you for subscribing. Exodus, chapter 34. Moses comes down from Mount Sinai. God told Moses to make a second set of stone tablets to replace the ones Moses had broken in anger. Early in the morning, Moses went up to Mount Sinai again. God descended there in a cloud, and proclaimed his name. God showed himself to be merciful, gracious, and truth-loving. Moses humbly bowed down and worshipped, asking to be with the Israelites. God made a new covenant and gave them new commandments. And he clearly stated the rules that the Israelites were to follow. After staying on the mountain for 40 days, Moses came down with the 2 stone tablets in his hands. To his surprise, Moses' face was radiant from his conversation with God. The people were afraid, but Moses delivered God's word and fulfilled his mission as a leader among them. This scene reminds us of God's grace, the faithfulness of the covenant, and Moses' devotion. Provided by the Bible History School. Thank you for subscribing. Exodus, chapter 35. Sabbath ordinances and offerings. The Israelites gathered in the wilderness to hear the word of God. Moses spoke about the Sabbath that God had commanded. After working hard for 6 days, the 7th day was to be kept as a holy Sabbath and dedicated to God. On this day, no work was to be done, not even fire was to be lit. There was also a word about offerings to God. Everyone was invited to volunteer to offer various materials needed for the tabernacle, such as gold, silver, blue thread, and acacia wood. The people began to offer their offerings with joy. Those whose hearts were moved, those who were skilled, and the leaders all came forward diligently and willingly gave what they had. God specifically appointed Bezalel and Oholiab among them, and gave them wisdom and skill to do all the delicate work of the tabernacle. This was a beautiful expression of each person's praise and devotion to God. Provided by the Bible History School. Thank you for subscribing. Exodus, chapter 36. Making the tabernacle. Bezalel, Oholiab, and those who had been given wisdom and skill by God began to build the tabernacle under the guidance of Moses. Every morning, the people voluntarily brought offerings, and the materials were more than enough for the work. The wise men carefully embroidered the 10 curtains and the cherubim pattern made of fine twisted thread. They made a covering with goat hair and leather to complete the appearance of the tabernacle. They erected pillars and made supports with acacia wood, gold, silver, and bronze. They handled each material delicately and faithfully followed the design set for the tabernacle. All of this work was done with a fearful heart for God. There was nothing lacking in the complete construction of the tabernacle. Worship and the glory of God will dwell in it. Provided by the Bible History School. Thank you for subscribing. Exodus, chapter 37. Making the Ark of the Covenant and the altar. Exodus chapter 37 shows Bezalel carefully making the sacred items to be used in the tabernacle, according to the command of Jehovah. Bezalel first made the Ark of the Covenant out of acacia wood, and covered it inside and out with pure gold, attaching gold rims and reins to it so that it could be moved. He made the mercy seat out of pure gold, and carved 2 cherubs, with shining wings on it to face the mercy seat. He also made the table, the lampstand, and the altar for incense out of acacia wood, and covered them with gold. And all the utensils were also made with great care. In particular, the lampstand and its decorations were carefully hammered together and connected as one. And everything from the bowls and cups to the spoons and the pouring jugs were made out of pure gold. The holy anointing oil and incense were also perfectly made according to the instructions of Jehovah. This shows how pure and holy the tabernacle must be for worshiping God. Provided by the Bible History School. Thank you for subscribing. Exodus, chapter 38. Making the altar of burnt offering. The Israelites built the tabernacle, according to the command given by God through Moses. The altar of burnt offering was made of acacia wood, and was elaborately made square, 5 cubits long and wide, and 3 cubits high. It had horns attached to its 4 corners, and the altar was covered entirely with bronze. The utensils of the altar, such as the bucket, shovels, basins, and meat hooks, were also made of bronze. A bronze net was installed under the altar, and was meticulously made. The water basin was also made of bronze. And it was made from the bronze mirrors of the women, who served before the tabernacle. The fence surrounding the courtyard was paved with linen, and the pillars, bases, and hooks were decorated with bronze and silver. All the preparations and materials were calculated and recorded. This shows that the sanctuary and the courtyard were prepared and completed according to God's command. Provided by the Bible History School. Thank you for subscribing. Exodus, chapter 39. Making the priest's garments. In Exodus chapter 39, the Israelites made the priest's garments, as the Lord had commanded Moses. They wove the ephod with intricate hands using gold, blue, purple, and scarlet threads, and finely twisted linen. They also made shoulder pieces and added belts. They engraved the names of the 12 tribes of Israel on each stone. The gold chains connected to the breastplate were also intricately made. They also made the other garments of the priests, including the blue garments, linen, belts, and badges, all according to God's command. Finally, the tabernacle's furniture and pillars were completely prepared. After confirming that all the work had been done according to the Lord's word, Moses blessed the Israelites. This was the moment when God's command was thoroughly realized through the Israelites. Provided by the Bible History School. Thank you for subscribing. Exodus, chapter 40. Dedicating the tabernacle. Moses began to build the tabernacle, according to the command of the Lord. First, he set up the structure of the tabernacle, placed the Ark of the Covenant inside, and covered the Ark with a curtain. He placed the table, and placed the bread of the presence on it, set up the lampstand, and lit it. He also placed the golden incense altar, and burned incense. After placing the altar of burnt offering, and the laver in their designated places, he completed all preparations. Aaron and his sons were washed with water. They were anointed with oil and consecrated as priests. Moses did everything according to the command of the Lord, and completed the tabernacle. At that moment, a cloud covered the tabernacle, and the glory of the Lord filled the tabernacle. Because of this, even Moses could not enter the tabernacle. Whenever the cloud rose, the Israelites would begin their march. And whenever the cloud settled, they would stay. During the day, the cloud stayed over the tabernacle, and at night, the fire stayed over the tabernacle. The people of Israel could always sense the presence of Jehovah. Provided by the Bible History School. Thank you for subscribing.